Chapter 1 of Human Behavior in Organization will tackle about the overview of the organizational behavior. In this chapter, the primary purpose is to introduce the field of organizational behavior. It will begin by defining organizational behavior as the study of human behavior in organizational setting. Now, the interface between human behavior and the organization will also be articulated, and the organization in itself as a whole. Now, the four functions that make up the manager's jobs are planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. It also will be also discussed and articulated. Now, um, the chapter will also explore the various roles, talking about the interpersonal, informational, and decision-making process that the manager plays, and the skills and the technical, the interpersonal, conceptual, and diagnostic must be applied in the organization. Now, the chapter will also continue with the review of the emerging perspectives on organizational behavior, focusing on the systems theory, on the situational theory, and the interactional view. Now, the chapter will conclude by examining the outcomes, the individual, for the group, and for the team, and the organization as a whole, and that are important for an organizational effectiveness. The chapter objectives will be the following. It will define the organizational behavior. It will identify the functions that comprise the management process and relate them to organizational behavior. It will relate organizational behavior to basic managerial roles and their skills. And then it will describe contemporary organizational behavior, and at the same time we'll be able to discuss contextual perspectives on organizational behavior. What is organizational behavior? The meaning of the organizational behavior states that the organizational behavior is the study of human behavior in organizational settings. Now, the interface between human behavior and the organization in itself, and then the organization as a whole in itself. All interface between the three are ultimately necessary for a comprehensive understanding of organizational behavior. Now, what is the importance of organizational behavior? It is important because most people are born and educated and then started working and then leave and they die. So that is the cycle in relations to an organization. Now, the study of behavior of people in organization is extremely important. Why? Because organization influence our lives so powerfully that we must pay close attention to and be concerned with about our behavior in organization in itself. Now, since most people that are aware and are aware of the concept of the human behavior in organization are either present or future managers. So we take a managerial perspective in our study as we come along in our discussions. Now, the organizational behavior and management. So what is the relationship between the two? Now, since organizational behavior is not a defined business, now function or area such as the finance or marketing perhaps, one does not see a position labeled as organizational behavior manager in typical organizational chart. Now, an understanding of organizational behavior will provide all the managers insights and tools to carry out their jobs more effectively. Managers can use their understanding on organizational behavior to understand why their colleagues and why their superiors and why their co-workers and even themselves behave as they do, or regardless of the size and the type of organizations that they are identified with. Now we tackle the organizational behavior and its relationship to the management process. Despite its inherent complexity and unpredictability, while rich in opportunity and excitement as a whole, managerial work generally involves performing four functions, usually simultaneously. Like what are these? The planning. In the planning, it's a process of determining the organization's desire, desired future position, and deciding how to get there through its visions and missions. Getting there, uh, uh, organizing even. Organizing next after the planning, the process of designing jobs, uh, the process of grouping jobs into manageable units, and organizing to get established patterns of authority amongst job and groups of jobs. Now, next function is the leading. Leading is the process of motivating members of the organization to work together toward the organizational goals. And controlling is the last one. It is the process of monitoring and correcting the activities of the organization and its people to keep them headed toward their goals. So that is the organizational behavior and integrating it into the management process. Now, the organizational behavior and the manager's job. So what is the relationship between the two? Managers must play a variety of roles using a set of critical skills in order to carry out the basic management functions successfully, which I have earlier mentioned. Now, the basic managerial roles are the following. Interpersonal roles. Interpersonal roles are primarily social in nature. Examples that includes the figurehead, the leader, the liaisons. So these are interpersonal roles integrated in the work process. Now next part of the basic managerial roles is the informational roles. It involves some aspect of information processing. For example, including monitor, disseminator of communications, and spokesperson conveying communications. Now, next is the decision-making roles. That's part of the managerial role. In the decision-making roles, it consists of four different types. So what are these? Entrepreneurial, disturbance, handler, resource allocator, and negotiator. So, as a decision maker, he is all of those mentioned. That is the basic managerial role. Next is the critical managerial skills. So, what are these? The technical skills. Technical skills are necessary to accomplish the specific tasks within the organizations. And next is the interpersonal skills. These are used to communicate with and understand and motivate individual and the group as a team. Next, critical managerial skills is the conceptual skills. These are the manager's ability to think in the abstract. And then next is the diagnostic skills, no, under the critical managerial skills, the diagnostic skills, which allow the managers to understand better the cause and the effect relationship and recognize the optimal solutions to problems. Now, we discuss further the contemporary organizational behavior. Organizational behavior is characterized by an interdisciplinary focus and a descriptive nature. Now, the characteristic of the field. Oh, so number one, the interdisciplinary focus. So what are these? The organizational behavior synthesizes several other fields, including psychology, sociology, anthropology, political science, economics, engineering, and medicine. Now, a descriptive nature. Currently, the primary goal of organizational behavior is to describe, rather than prescribe, relationship between two or more individual behavioral variables. The reasons for organizational behavior's descriptive nature include the immaturity of the field, the complexities of studying human behavior, and the lack of valid, reliable, and accepted definitions and measures. Now, what are the basic concepts of the field? The concepts of primary concerns for organizational behavior can be grouped into three categories. So what are these? The categories are individual processes, interpersonal processes, and organizational processes, and characteristics. Now, in the individual processes include individual differences. So what are these? In terms of attitudes, in terms of personalities, etc. Perception, attribution, employee motivation, learning, reinforcement, and work stress are also part of the individual processes. Now, the interpersonal processes deal with communication in organizations, in a group, in a team, leadership, decision making, and negotiations are part of it. Now, next is the organizational processes and characteristics. That include the organizational structure, the organization design, the organization culture, and organization change and development. So that is the organizational process and characteristics. Now, in the contextual perspective of on organizational behavior, there are several contemporary perspectives that are present and have evolved from the field of organizational behavior. So what are these? One is the systems and situational perspective. The systems and situational perspectives are concerned with interrelationships among organizational elements and between organizational and environmental elements. Now, the system perspectives. A system is an interrelated set of elements that function as a whole. I repeat, a system is an interrelated set of elements that function as a whole. Now, the framework for system study consists of the inputs, and then the transformation, and then the outputs, and then the feedback. So that is the framework for systems. Now, an organizational system receives four kinds of input from its environment. So what are these? Material, human, financial, and informational. Okay, so these are the four kinds of input from its environment, which is material, human, financial, informational. Now, these inputs are combined all together and transformed and then returned to the environment in the form of products or services. And profits or losses, employee behaviors, and additional information. And finally, the system receives through feedbacks from the environment regarding the inputs imputed. Okay, so that is the system's perspective. Now, next is the situational perspective. So what happens there? Because of the complexities of human behavior and the organizational settings as a whole, universal relationships seldom, if ever, exist. Okay? And most relationships are contingent. That is, the relationship between any two variables is likely to be influenced by the other variables. And there are distinct differences between universal and situational perspectives. Okay? Next is the interactionalism. It is the people versus the situation. People and situation. Now, the interactional view, a relatively new approach to understanding organizational behavior. And it is based on the assumption that individual behavior results from a continuous and multi-directional interaction between characteristics of the person and those of the situation. And this view attempts to explain how people select, how people interpret, and how people change various situations. Now, managing for effectiveness. Goals or outcomes exist at three different levels in an organization. So what are these? So number one, individual level outcomes is a result from individual behaviors, including productivity, including performance, including absenteeism, and including turnover. Now, attitudes and stress are other individual level outcomes that is influenced by managers. Now, number two, group and tandem team, or rather, group and team level outcomes include productivity, performance, attitudes, just as individuals do. But groups may also develop norms of behavior and levels of cohesiveness. And then lastly, organization level outcomes. In addition to those for individuals and groups, may include measures of financial performance, such as profitability, stock price, return on investment, growth rate, and so on and so forth. Okay? So these are the managing for effectiveness. That is the goals or outcomes that exist at three different levels of an organization. Okay? I have already discussed the chapter, the introductory chapter for an overview of the organizational behavior. I hope I have imparted a lot of learnings or some learnings about an overview of the organizational behavior. So till then, in my watch for my next chapter 2 discussion. Thank you.